website and send back used toys, and the company will reuse what they can. Mattel's aiming for 100% recycled, recyclable, or bio-based materials by the end of this decade. Our producers are Meredith Garrettson, Stephen Ryan, Daniel Shin, and Erica Soderstrom. I'm David Brancaccio with the Marketplace Morning Report from APM, American Public Media.
Florida Polytechnic University, ranked nationally as a top 40 public undergraduate engineering college by U.S. News & World Report, offering master's degree tracks in robotics, engineering management, and data science. More at floridapoly.edu.
Baptist Health knows time matters when it comes to stroke. Every minute a stroke goes untreated can mean an extra week of recovery. Recognize symptoms, including face drooping, arm weakness, and speech difficulties. Act fast. Call 911.
Wayne Hogan of the Terrell Hogan Law Firm. Malignant mesothelioma. Asbestos dust causes this cancer. Learn more from board-certified civil trial specialist Wayne Hogan at waynehogan.law.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Ahead in the next 5 minutes, live local news for the First Coast from the WJCT News team.
Restaurants are open, diners are itching to go out to eat. There's just one problem: not enough staff. I'm Melissa Ross, and just ahead this hour on First Coast Connect, we'll take a closer look at the restaurant industry's current problem: not enough available workers to serve you when you go out to eat. That conversation's just ahead, then later.
We always seem to come back to this, well, that's all well and good, but how are you going to pay for it? Entering in the idea of modern monetary theory.
The Biden rescue plan is raining money and benefits down on Americans. Critics worry that it will increase the deficit. Proponents of modern monetary theory say those fears are misplaced. We'll take a closer look. That and more, just ahead. After the day's news.
Live from NPR News, I'm Corva Coleman. Violence continues in the Palestinian territories and in Israel. Palestinian Hamas militants are firing scores of rockets into Israel. Israel is using airstrikes to target Palestinian militant sites. Palestinian officials say at least 26 Palestinians are dead and more than 100 others are injured. The Associated Press reports 2 women have been killed in Israel. The violence is tied to confrontations between Israelis and Palestinians at Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, a site that is also sacred to Jews. The Food and Drug Administration has authorized Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine for use in children aged 12 to 15. NPR's Ping Huang reports adolescents could start receiving inoculations as early as this week.
For many teens, the past year has been a drag. They've been super stuck at home, missing book clubs, birthday parties, other events. Patricia Stinchfield, who is a nurse practitioner at Children's Minnesota, says for 12 to 15-year-olds, one big reason to get the COVID vaccine is liberation.
What this vaccine is going to do is allow them to get freedom to go back and sing in that choir without a mask on, and they can go to their sleepover camp with all their other vaccinated friends and not worry about getting sick or play in their sports team.
The FDA determined that the Pfizer vaccine is safe and effective in children as young as 12. Next, on Wednesday, advisors to the CDC will make recommendations on how to use it. Ping Huang, NPR News.
Dry conditions are worsening in California. Governor Gavin Newsom has expanded his emergency drought declaration to nearly all California counties.
So this drought, though the second year of a drought, happening just a few years after the end of a 5-year drought that began in 2012 and ended in 2016, in many respects is familiar, but in other respects is more challenging and more acute than we could have imagined.
The declaration covers 41 of California's 58 counties. A former nursing assistant in West Virginia is set to be sentenced for murdering at least 7 men at a veterans hospital. Dave Mistich of West Virginia Public Broadcasting reports.
46-year-old Rita Mays faces at least 7 life sentences for unnecessarily injecting the veterans with insulin, causing sudden hypoglycemic events that resulted in death. In July, Mays accepted a plea deal and admitted to 7 counts of second-degree murder and an additional count of assault with intent to murder. Federal officials began looking into the case during the summer of 2018 before zeroing in on Mays, who worked the overnight shift, often unsupervised. An attorney representing families of slain veterans says it may be impossible to know how many people Mays injected with insulin. To date, she has not offered a motive for the killings. For NPR News, I'm Dave Mistich.
This is NPR.
You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Good morning, I'm Brendan Rivers. The St. Johns County Sheriff's Office has charged a 14-year-old boy in the death of a 13-year-old girl who went missing from her Durbin Crossing home Sunday. According to Sheriff Rob Hardwick, Tristan Bailey was last seen a little after 1 a.m. Sunday. Her body was found in the woods near Durbin Crossing around 6 Sunday evening.
Again, we're in the very early stages, so at this time he is charged with second-degree murder. He is in custody of the Department of Juvenile Justice. Can we add charges on? Sure, that's a collaborative effort we would do with the Office of the State Attorney.
Hardwick says it's also up to the state attorney's office whether to charge 14-year-old Aiden Fucci as an adult. Bailey and Fucci both attended the K-8 Patriot Oaks Academy near Durbin Crossing. Hardwick says the medical examiner is working to determine what killed the 13-year-old girl. Publix pharmacies are now accepting walk-ins for the COVID-19 vaccine at all of its pharmacies. The Lakeland-based supermarket chain says on its website that customers can choose between the 2-dose Moderna vaccine and the one-and-done Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Publix had been offering walk-in vaccinations at its pharmacies in Alabama, North Carolina, and Tennessee. The notice that walk-ins are also welcome at Publix stores in Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and Virginia comes a week after President Joe Biden required pharmacies in the federal retail pharmacy program to offer walk-in vaccinations. It's about 73 degrees and mostly cloudy right now in Jacksonville. Partly sunny this afternoon with highs near 89. Tonight, mostly cloudy with lows around 69 and a slight chance for rain before 7. Showers and thunderstorms are likely tomorrow, mainly after 3. You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include T. Rowe Price, committed to helping investors close the gap towards reaching their retirement goals. T. Rowe Price, invest with confidence. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Restaurants are open. Diners are itching to go out to eat. There's just one problem: not enough staff. Good morning. We're live from Studio 5. I'm Melissa Ross, and this is First Coast Connect. Thanks for listening. Just ahead, the restaurant worker crunch in Florida and what it means for the workers and for you, the diner. Give us a call. It's 549-2937. Then later, it's our monthly book club today, plus a profile of the new Art Bikes Jax. First, though, your COVID update for Tuesday: 2.27 million cases in Florida, now cumulatively tallied since the pandemic began. That's a 2,296 person increase from the Sunday count. The death toll in Florida now stands at 35,783, with 52 more Florida residents dying overnight. People are still dying from this virus, so please go get your vaccine. And at the same time, the FDA granted Pfizer emergency use for its COVID vaccine yesterday for kids aged 12 to 15. So your tweens and teens can now go get the vaccine. Now, in this pandemic, restaurants and other small businesses closed for a time, of course, but as they have reopened, they have a new problem: finding workers. Some owners say it's because they believe people would rather take unemployment checks and sit at home than come back to work. But other labor advocates argue that it's time to pay workers more per hour to entice them back on the job. Nicole Chapman is Northeast Florida Regional Director and Florida Inn's Chapter Director with the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. And she's on the line. Hi, Nicole. Good morning.
Hey, Melissa. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm great, and it's so good to have you. Here's our question to callers. Are you a restaurant owner or manager? Or maybe you're a restaurant worker? Whatever your situation, maybe you just miss going out to eat at your favorite restaurant because they might not have enough shifts to cover the staff, to cover the diners. Give us a call as we talk about this. It's 549-2937, 549-2937. Emails to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. tweets to @MelissaInJax, and our Facebook page is open. Okay, Nicole, this is a problem all over the country, Florida no exception. From your point of view, why is the industry having such a tough time finding workers right now?
Absolutely. So when we had to close last year, it was really hard. Some of those folks really needed that steady income. So they might have left the industry and found a more stable career path with what they think is more stable hours, maybe at Amazon or other. They've just left the industry altogether. So now we're open and we're welcoming them back. And there's definitely more competitive pay than ever before, lots of hiring bonuses out there and plenty of positions available with a fun atmosphere.
Okay, let's talk about that. Chipotle, a major chain, is advertising that it's going to $15 an hour for shifts. Buc-ee's, a really popular convenience and travel stop. We have a new location here in our area. At Buc-ee's restaurants, the minimum wage for a cashier is $14 an hour. Team leader, $16 an hour. 3 weeks paid time off. These are signs that Buc-ee's has posted in its restaurants and stores that are being widely shared this morning on social media. What about this? Is it time to raise wages per hour, the amount of dollars restaurant workers are getting per hour to get them back to work?
Absolutely. And I think you can see that because of the competition out there in the marketplace, wages have been raised. So many of the hourly rates that are for the positions available, cooks, bartenders, food runners, hostesses, housekeepers, all of those have risen over the last year. So those are definitely a competitive workforce right now.
Now, you're having a job fair. We'll talk about that in a few moments. But let me ask you as well your thoughts about the president, President Biden, saying people will lose their unemployment benefits if they turn down job opportunities.
Absolutely. I hear from our restaurant and hotel members often that they have interviews scheduled and folks just don't show up. So if they've got 5 interviews scheduled, maybe one person actually shows up for the interview. There are positions to have and places to fill. We've got about 1,000 jobs just in our area in the hospitality sector, jobs open that we need to fill. If you probably noticed, some restaurants are having to close certain days to give their employees they do have a break. And some hotels are having to shut down rooms so they just don't have enough housekeepers. So we have positions available. And we're hoping that with that being said by our president and also by the governor, that this will get folks back to work.
Getting people back to work. What are your questions about this as we talk with Nicole Chapman with the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association? Let us know if you're a business owner, a worker. Let us know if you've noticed changes in restaurants as you've been going out to eat. It's 549-2937 to join us. We'll go to your calls in a moment. Nicole, last week I went by the Pollo Tropical restaurant in the Regency area here in Jacksonville. There was a sign on the drive-through window, closed until further notice. And I stopped a guy in the parking lot and he said, we just can't cover the shifts. And so that's the kind of thing that we're seeing at some establishments. How frustrating is that for you in your position?
Absolutely. It's really hard because our restaurants and hotels are ready to be open and serve our clients. The pent-up demand is there to head back out as vaccination rates are increasing. People want to go out to dinner. People want to take a vacation. And it's really hard to tell your clients, hey, your guests, hey, we can't welcome you right now. We just don't have enough staff. Or if you do stay open with limited staff, your service times change and people aren't happy with that. So that can lead to bad reviews. So it definitely is frustrating when our small businesses and hotels want to get back open and they just don't have the staff to do so.
There's a new report in the Wall Street Journal this week saying that among the reasons potential workers are holding back from going back are fear of getting COVID, lack of childcare, and also they can take in a little more with an unemployment check than they can going back to being a line cook or a cashier or whatever it is. I just am wondering if what we're seeing now will have the unintended consequence of the $15 minimum wage becoming more of a norm across the land. What do you think?
I definitely think you can see that. So some of the fact that we have hiring bonuses and incentives for if you refer a friend, that's never happened really before in our industry. Some of our employers have gone to daily pay so that folks can quickly leave there and pay their child care sitter. And there's different opportunities. So there's incentive programs now for all levels of the restaurant and hotel that might not have been there before. So it's definitely caused the hospitality industry to take a look at how we pay our staff and come up with new creative ways to get folks back to work and get those positions filled.
5492937. Helen in St. Johns County. Hey, Helen, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for having me on. I did want to say a couple of points. I used to work in the restaurant industry. I taught my kids how to work in the restaurant industry to help them out with their college expenses. And it used to be, it's hard work, but it used to be where you could really earn some really great money in tips to help sustain yourself. But with this pandemic, women nationwide have felt the brunt of the pandemic. Women also account for the large majority of hospitality staff, at least on the front of the house. You usually are line cooks, and those people are in the back of the house, and those tend to be men. But women have been dealing with childcare issues, aging family members who have suffered with the pandemic, and they've been juggling so much to return to a restaurant industry that is demanding, where the customers are difficult, don't want to wear masks, putting them in danger. There's so many of those things, and I think we're seeing that the wages not only have to change, but the very nature of who's working in this country, now everybody realizes how essential they are, just like teachers. I'm a former teacher. Teachers also on the front lines dealing with the hazards of this pandemic, and they're still making about $40,000 a year.
Yeah.
There's so many issues, and women have dealt with the brunt of it, and the hospitality industry is feeling that as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Helen. Thank you for that. And here's
Thank you.
As we talk about this, Nicole, women do have special challenges, childcare in particular. Here's a comment on our Facebook page from Robert. He says, I have friends that own restaurants and bars. They complain about not being able to find staff. At the same time, they have a long history of paying their workers $5 to $10 an hour with little to no health and dental insurance or 401ks. They usually keep employees at less than 35 hours a week to keep them part-time. Why not pay them a living wage for 40 hours a week and insurance? They did take taxpayer dollars to get the cash during the pandemic. Okay, I know there are two sides to this equation, Nicole, but what about the caller's point that women have had a special burden throughout this whole time?
I think we could say that in any industry. All industries have been impacted by that. I'm sure you and I have been impacted by that as well. So it is hard, and you have to come up with creative solutions to find out, but you also have to do what's best for your family. If it's staying home to care for your child or family members, then that's what's best. If it's finding some childcare and getting back to work to provide income for your family, that's what we have to do. So it's just finding a job, and there's plenty of jobs in the hospitality industry that might not be forward-facing, that might be a little bit behind the scenes, that you might have that day-to-day contact with guests. So there's just lots of different options out there. I know in our industry, there's just so many different options. You could be front of house, you could be back of house, you could be a little bit behind the scenes, so many different things to do.
Richard on the north side. Hello, Richard.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Melissa. Real quick, I just wanted to share that I think the conversation is not going as big as it should go, because we're allowing the politicians to make this about the minimum wage and unemployment. That's not where the battleground is. The battleground is between entrepreneurship and corporations. This country has a history from slavery all the way through the Industrial Revolution to be able to control the big machines, the money machines. And then through every economic collapse, they're too big to fail, and we fix them. The pandemic caught everybody by surprise, and the machines didn't collapse as much as they stopped working. And now they need the energy to come back in and get them started again. Well, people have figured it out. When Amazon came about, or even Walmart used to close mom and pop grocery stores and nobody said a word. Then AOL came around and closed call centers and started sending jobs overseas. Nobody said a word. Uber came around and started closing cab companies and nobody said a word. Amazon started putting people into business. Half of what Amazon sells is from people like me who can post stuff online and make money at home. And then the pandemic hit and everybody figured it out. I can now cut 10 yards a week and make more money than I can make at a restaurant sweating in the back of the kitchen. So unless jobs rot and money raises up, entrepreneurs have way too many options right now to make money. And unless, they're going to be $40 minimum wage is not going to be enough very soon if we were to truly make it a competitive economy. But politicians are lowering the bar so that corporations can stay alive, and then forcing workers to go back to work. And until we
All
get
right.
these
Yeah,
politicians
Richard.
out who are doing that, we're going to continue this. But that's what I think
Thank
is
you.
happening.
Thank you, Richard. Okay. Let me throw a few more comments under Richard's for you, Nicole. As I mentioned, Chipotle is offering $15 an hour, free college tuition for some degrees to workers who stay past 4 months. Some restaurants are dangling signing bonuses to get workers to come in, $2,000 signing bonuses. A Florida McDonald's offered $50 to an applicant who would just to show up for the interview. Okay, so as Richard points out, workers are seeing other options, and that's making it tougher for your business. They're having to come up with all sorts of enticements. What's the long-term impact of this dynamic on your sector, do you think?
Absolutely. And I think we can look at when you have to raise prices, you have to raise it somewhere else too. So not only are the price of labor going up, but the price of food costs is going up because many of those folks are having labor issues or other issues as well. So to the cost of the restaurateur and hotelier right now, the prices are up. So what they're going to have to do is raise prices on the menu or raise prices on the hotel stay. So neither of those is what the general public really wants, but we're going to have to do something like that to offset these things. We're all wondering when will we have to, is the signing bonus here to stay? Is college tuition here to stay? We work closely with the American Hotel Lodging and the National Restaurant Association, and they've got some great apprenticeship programs out there that you can start and really learn how to be a great line cook that helps you lead into being an executive chef, which also helps you lead into owning a restaurant. So knowing that there's some career opportunities out there and some support with different training programs, we are really pushing that to all of our employees, that field training is where you can really, it's an industry of opportunities. You can start small and you can end up owning the restaurant or being the general manager of the hotel.
Okay. Audrey in Neptune Beach. Hey, Audrey, go ahead.
Hi, I'm a college student and I've always worked in my summers. So I can imagine that a lot of these food industry jobs will be filled by students. Can you foresee what sort of impact or if this will happen again in the fall when a lot of those jobs become open again?
Yeah. What happens when the students go back to class, Nicole?
Absolutely. I think we're seeing that too. Our big push right now is to get some of those college kids or even high school kids into the job force this summer to help offset the big need. And hopefully in the fall, the traditional workers will be ready and willing to come back to work. I know I've seen from Chick-fil-A, I get a text that says, hey, come to work while your kids are at school. So different ways to attract the worker right now. But we are hoping that by fall, we've got the traditional workforce ready to come back to work and fill those positions.
Lots of tweets about this. Here's one from Sierra. If we want to be constantly surrounded by convenient food options, we need to accept that food service is a dignified job like any other that deserves benefits and a livable wage. Jason tweets, if we were to institute universal health care and child care, small businesses would be one of the top benefactors. Michael is along Beach Boulevard. Hi, Michael.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Great, thanks. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to kind of continue that. That's a great setup. We have really, and I've been guilty of it myself years ago, and less so now, fortunately. But this demonization of people in the fast food or service industry, demonization of teachers, this constant disrespect of people who are just trying to do the best jobs they can in most cases. And if you compound on that with things like really bad management, poor management practices, sexual harassment, and then put the cherry on the top is customers who are screaming at them, yelling at them, treating them awfully. If I was in that position, I'd think twice about giving up $300 a week government check to go work for $8 at in a fast food restaurant or something like that. So, we really need to think about this in broader terms than just economics. A lot of people have really debased each other in the society. We really need to be thinking about that as part of our work lives.
Thank you, Michael. Here's a tweet from Jill. With the shortage in restaurant staff, please remind customers to be kind. My 16-year-old was cursed out by customers on Sunday because they had to wait for their order. She came home in tears, tweets Jill. Now, here's the other side of it for you, Nicole. Restaurant owners operate on very slim margins, maybe as little as 3 to 5%. They will argue that they cannot afford to raise wages and offer benefits, that they're running a small business and can only pay so much. So that's the perspective of a small business restaurant owner, maybe not so much the perspective of a huge corporation like McDonald's. So this is a systemic issue we have in this country. This is an economic systemic problem.
Yes, you're correct. It's about 2 to 4% is the traditional independent restaurant margin there. So the only way to help offset some of the increase in wages, and I can tell you this, I've reached so many restaurateurs have reached out this year asking of different ways to offer insurance. And when they go out to their staff and say, okay, we're going to offer health insurance, you have to contribute as well, they get a lot of pushback from the staff saying, oh, well, we can't afford to offset that. So we're working with United Healthcare to come up with some options for people to buy independent insurance, not through the employer, but at a very discounted cost, so that they can get that. But the end story is if we raise wages, then we're going to have to raise cost of goods and services to the consumer.
Okay, let's talk about that. Say a restaurant paid everybody $15 an hour. As I mentioned, Chipotle's going to go to that. Other chains that are getting a lot of attention on social media right now, like Buc-ee's. Mm-hmm. How much do they pass the costs on to the consumer?
Well, they're fortunate in those two instances that they're a corporate chain and they get corporate pricing when they order their food and supplies, and our independent restaurant does not. So I was just talking to a member yesterday that said their food bill from their food purveyor has gone up 40% in the last week. They have yet to raise prices to the consumer, but it's going to have to happen if the food prices continue to rise. So it's all about those corporate contracts, and when you're a big corporate Chipotle or a Buc-ee's, you're able to get those corporate deals because you buy in bulk compared to our independent restaurants that aren't able to buy in bulk like they are.
With all of that said, let's talk now for a few minutes about the Northeast Hospitality Job Fair. It's coming up next Tuesday, May 18th, multiple events, and they all run from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Fill us in if you could, Nicole.
Absolutely. So we've heard from our members that hiring is an issue. So we put together a hospitality job fair focusing on just those hospitality jobs. It's Tuesday, May 18th, as you mentioned, from 10 to 2. And we're at 4 locations at the same time. One in Fernandina Beach at the Atlantic Recreation Center, Jacksonville Beach at the 4 Points by Sheraton Hotel, Markets at Town Center over at Prati Italia, and down in St. Augustine at the Holiday Inn right off on the interstate. So we've got 4 positions at one time. We've got about 10 to 15 restaurant and hotels per venue. So all ready to hire. We'll have on-site interviews available, and many of the groups there will be offering hiring and retention incentives to those coming out that day.
And as we talked about, some of the goodies that are being offered are pretty eye-popping. We'll have to see what they come up with. Mm-hmm. If you're looking for work, go to frla.org/Northeast Job Fair. frla.org/Northeast Job Fair. That's coming up next Tuesday. Locations across the First Coast. And she's Nicole Chapman, the Northeast Florida Regional Director, Florida Inn's Chapter Director with the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. Nicole, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Melissa. Have a great afternoon.
Much more still ahead. Later in the hour, our book club, plus how the new Art Bikes Jax is getting you off the couch and checking out public art across the city. But up next.
We always seem to come back to this, well, that's all well and good, but how are you going to pay for it? Entering in the idea of modern monetary theory.
A new way of looking at money, MMT, and how it interacts with the Biden rescue plan. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The Biden administration is spending big to bring the country out of recession, raining down benefits on Americans. Fiscal hawks say the country can't afford it, but proponents of what's known as modern monetary theory say those old arguments about the deficit need a fresh look. So what is MMT? I spoke with Daniel Cronrath, professor at FSCJ. Take a listen. Hi, Daniel. Good to talk to you. Thanks for being back with us.
Thanks for having me, Melissa.
Okay. In his first 100 days in office, President Biden has put forth roughly $6 trillion in spending proposals for this country. He's delivered on about a third of that, and he wants to spend on boosting the economy, COVID relief, beefing up infrastructure, higher taxes on corporations and the wealthiest Americans, and affordable child care for American families, not to mention free or virtually free community college. Now, you, of course, teach at FSCJ. And you talk about this whole vision for reshaping the U.S. economy through the lens of what's known as MMT, or modern monetary theory. Before we get into MMT, I first want to ask you your thoughts about this level of spending that the president is proposing.
Well, I think it's a good start would be my initial reaction. I think that in so many ways, Melissa, there are things in our country that we need to be investing in right now that for a lot of reasons, mostly coming back to the conversation of how will you pay for it, that we've been kicking the can down the road. When we talk to things like universal child care, which obviously has an economic benefit, not just a moral benefit to American families. When we talk about positioning the United States for climate change and for resiliency, and we look at the massive dollars which are attached to this, we seem to keep coming back to this scenario where we can find $4 trillion to bail out corporations at the beginning of COVID. We can find at the beginning of the Obama administration, we always seem to be able to have money to prop up corporate America. But then when it comes to real world things that we need to be investing in for ourselves and for our children and grandchildren, like obviously some of the things we talked about, the president's infrastructure goals, we always seem to come back to this, well, that's all well and good, but how are you going to pay for it? Entering in the idea of modern monetary theory, which is really nothing more than a description of what our economy is actually doing right now. It's a different kind of lens than a lot of people who have maybe taken a college econ class are used to looking at. You know, the whole idea that the government is using our money, taxpayer money, in order to fund things. And what MMT teaches us is that's fundamentally not the case.
And why not?
Well, because the U.S. government has a distinction of being the only currency issuer of the U.S. dollar. So whether you're talking about the Ross household or whether you're talking about the Cronrath household or the city of Jacksonville or the state of Florida or Walmart or Microsoft, all of those entities I've just named and folks are currency users. We only have one currency issuer, and that's the United States government. It's Uncle Sam. So the entire idea that we're somehow going to run out of money or someday that our kids are going to have to pay back these debts that we're racking up, it's fundamentally inaccurate. You can't be the sole producer of something and run out of it.
Then how do you define modern monetary in terms of economic growth and also concerns that if this level of spending occurs, that we could see inflation as a response?
Sure. The first thing I would say is that the MMT framework, or this lens for looking at modern economics at the national level, it only applies to countries which have the distinction of being in control of their own currency, not having a currency which is fixed to another currency, and not being like the countries of the EU, the 19 countries that are currently have basically shelved their own currency in favor of operating on the euro. So when you hear someone say, well, the United States, if we spend like this, we could end up like Greece. That's just fundamentally incorrect, because when the Greeks went off of their own currency, they basically put themselves at the will of the EU when they had their own economic downturn. In the United States, we have the ability to print money with the caveat, as you just suggested, that the real two concerns with our level of spending are, one, inflation. How do we keep from putting so much money into the economy that it loses its value? And then two is taking on so much debt that at the end of the day, the United States doesn't have the ability to increase production to max the level of debt. You can only have as much debt as you have a nation, the productivity of the nation can support.
And let's also clarify that the debt and the deficit aren't the same thing.
No, the deficit is what we rack up on an annual basis. It's pretty much the gap in between how much we have budgeted for a given year and then how much we end up spending every year. With also too every year, and this is a certain amount of political theater, is the raising of what we call the
debt ceiling.
The debt ceiling, correct, where we basically Congress has to pass legislation in order to us to spend more than we've budgeted for. So now, for example, in the last term of President Trump, obviously the year before we got COVID, the president was operating about $1 trillion deficit. We know that in President Trump's last term, in 2020, that debt, and by the way, I'm not talking about the debt now, I'm talking about the deficit, was $4.2 trillion as the president and Congress tried to make funds and make liquidity available for folks who had been hurt through COVID. So to the extent when people say, well, how long can this go? One of the things I would point out to folks is that Japan is probably the best demonstrator of modern monetary theory right now. They have a quadrillion it's in yen, mind you, but their debt is 1 quadrillion yen. That's the equivalent of about $13 trillion U.S. dollars. They've seen no inflation for the last 20 years. As a matter of fact, they've been trying to create inflation because nobody's really interested in buying their treasuries because they don't bear any interest.
So at a certain point, are you saying that racking up these enormous amounts of debt just doesn't really matter, that it's not real money, that it never actually has to be paid back? What?
Well, certainly. I mean, certainly, you have to. Again, you can't rack up the amount of debt which is going to seed your economic activity within that country. Many folks will point to examples like Venezuela, where you had an economy where they began to, after the global petroleum prices fell, and then the Maduro regime was trying to basically print money in order to provide for the needs of the people. We knew what happened. Obviously, inflation, but with some dramatic differences. The United States' economy is very, very diverse. It's still growing. We still have the ability to produce goods and services at a level that the world has never seen before. And then the last big factor here, which really should give us some impetus to really look at this and say, what can we do once we accept this as fact? 70% of the world's nations right now, their currency reserve that they have held back isn't in their own currency. It's in the U.S. dollar. And it puts the United States in a really exciting position once you really think of the potential of this for how we could spend and how we could invest in our future once we understand the fact that debt and deficit aren't necessarily bad things, so long, again, as we're actively maintaining inflationary policy, which isn't going to basically make our currency worth less than it is now.
How would you assess modern monetary theory in the world of economics and in the political world? Is this a theory that's gaining traction, or is the conventional wisdom still centered around the idea that carrying debt is bad? Because of course we're all raised to think about that you don't want to have a lot of debt on your balance sheet.
Very much the latter, Melissa. It's most of your classic, whether you're a Keynesian or whether you've come from the Chicago School of Economics, most people will always continue to equate the fact that large deficits are bad, that government is like a household and it should be operating a balanced budget. Government is not a household. I don't know about you. I don't have a printing press in my house. I can't make money like the U.S. government can make. I have to be concerned about my spending and making sure that I'm not taking on too much credit. Our government doesn't have that issue. We have the ability, and really this has been played out when people say, well, this won't work, we're going to have inflation. Well, Melissa, under President Obama, we grew our national debt by $8.6 trillion. And every single year you would hear reports in the media, inflation's going to happen. It never happened. And it's not going to happen according to modern monetary theory based upon the fact that U.S. production is still high and that we're still and hopefully that we're properly investing in things for their future, like infrastructure, which effectively pays for itself.
What if there's a catastrophic event? Then does modern monetary theory go out the window if we aren't able to maintain certain baselines?
That would be an event that I would not be looking forward to. But one thing that I would say, regardless of your economic theory, if we were to have that kind of global event, it would probably wreck any monetary theory. I think that modern monetary, however, once we understand the idea that we aren't confined by these big numbers, yes, they're scary, particularly when it's framed in the level of, think about your household, think about your small business. You can't spend out more than you're taking in. You can't. That's a recipe for bankruptcy. Our country can't go bankrupt. So in the event we actually had a cataclysmic occurrence, as you're suggesting, understanding and looking at our economy through the MMT framework is the best way to address it. I think COVID's a wonderful example. If you had told anybody before the pandemic that in 2020 the Trump administration would be adding $4.2 trillion to the debt, they would be freaking out, until the realization came in that we had to do that in order to maintain our economy. And then we were able to do it.
And there is a book and a website you recommend for people that want to learn more about MMT. Yes?
Sure. It's a New York Times bestseller by Stony Brook economist Stephanie Kelton. She wrote a book which is referred to as The Deficit Myth. And this is to also stress, you're not going to meet anybody with MMT who doesn't think that deficits and debt cannot be a problem. It's really just understanding the fact that flipping what we've known and what we've conceived of economics, macroeconomic theory for a long time, anytime the public sector is operating a deficit or a debt of any kind, we need to start looking at that for what it really is. It's a private sector surplus. Anytime President Obama or President Trump actually, run up a debt or run up a deficit in order to have to deal with a situation as it occurs, those dollars, which occur on the federal government as being in the red, if you're looking at basically two-column accounting, that's money that's being left in the private sector. So I would definitely check out the Kelton book, and there's a lot of other things that you can get on. The theory, by the way, Melissa, is gaining more popularity, if only because I would argue it's impossible to ignore. It's almost similar in some ways if you were a climate change denier and you just were continually to try to deny it. Oh, we're not the cause of it. We're not the cause of it. The data's too pronounced. It's too obvious to see. And I believe that in the next 5 to 10 years that we're all going to be becoming very, very acquainted with modern monetary theory, or MMT, just because of the fact it is where we are in terms of our economy.
Always good to get your insights. He's Daniel Cronrath of FSCJ. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks for having me.
Well, as we all slowly emerge from our pandemic-laden lives, we can all say we've lived through history. Book club leader Stacy Goldring has a suggestion for something you could read this month that reflects that very same idea. It is Homer and Langley by the great E.L. Doctorow. Stacy, good morning.
Good morning, Melissa. How are you?
I'm great, and it's great to hear your voice. So, time to talk books. People are reading books like crazy. They have been all through the pandemic, and I love getting your suggestions. What prompted you to recommend Homer and Langley this month?
Well, I think when the pandemic first started, a lot of us turned to our closets and thought, who are we? And how did we end up with all this in our closet? And we all went through this cleansing, shall we say. But I think that Homer and Langley speaks to a greater theme. We're dealing with two fictional characters, two brothers, who at the turn of the century, at the beginning of the 20th century, we find them in their mansion in New York City, and they kind of have turned inward into themselves. They want to be self-reliant. Things have happened to them throughout their entire lives, and they've decided to close the world out and keep their stuff in. And as a result, I would argue they became the inspiration for the very popular television series Hoarders.
They were the original Hoarders.
The original Hoarders. In fact, today the fire departments around the country have a nickname for a term when they have to go to an emergency where the house is basically filled with, filled to capacity. And they call it, I believe it's called a Homer and Langley.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it's very sad. But anyway, so we're dealing with the narrator, one brother whose name is Homer. And Melissa, he's our narrator, and he's blind. But yet he tells us the story how we go through each decade as certain people are allowed to come into the lives of these two brothers. And each chapter represents something major that has happened to our country. And, you know, we go through Prohibition, World War One, World War II, internment camps, hippies, etc. So we get to experience segregation, etc., through the eyes of Homer, as he tells us what happens as Langley brings these people into their world, and then they either get kicked out or they end up leaving. And the book brings up some important themes, and I just a few of them that I can't recommend this book highly enough. But of course, I wouldn't come on air and talk about a book that wasn't worth your time. But one of those is, what is madness? And then if someone wants to be self-sufficient, who's to say that's right or wrong? And in the case of Homer and Langley, they end up not paying their bills, being electricity is cut off, the water is cut off. At one point, Langley, who's incredibly intelligent, schleps in a Model T and tries to hook up some type of Rube Goldberg contraption so they can generate their own electricity.
Oh, wow. And wasn't this based on a true story, too?
It was, Melissa. The story is based on Homer and Langley Collier, the Collier brothers, who owned a mansion on Fifth Avenue, and people would see them scouring, well, they'd see Langley mostly dressed, like a homeless man, scouring the streets looking for food and using pumps in city parks in order to get water. They just wanted to be left alone. And Homer and Langley, it talks about my brother's keeper. There are so many big themes in this book. And it's also about unrequited love. It's about how we as Americans treat others, whether they look different from us or whether they're radical and we don't understand their point of view. Do we toss them out? Do we accept them for who they are? It is a thin book, but it is chock full of much to discuss. And again, we have literature which is reflecting who we really are.
Who we are today, too. And as you said, as we read a book about a couple of real-life hoarders, this has been a time for so many Americans and people around the world to reevaluate their lives and their living space, cleaning out their closets, literally and figuratively.
Right. And why is it that our stuff, why do we feel so compelled to put our identity in our stuff? Who are we without our stuff? And what do we decide what is junk and what is treasure? And I think that goes to the mental illness idea of compulsive hoarding. Why the need to keep hold of it? And a lot of it goes to the fact that there's been loss. There's been loss in someone's life. And in the case of the Langley brothers, in the case of the Collier brothers, and in the case of the Homer and Langley in our book, they lost their parents very young. And so that seems to be the premise that Dr. O is taking. But I just want to read you a quote, a very short quote that Dr. O says about history and truth. It says, the historian will tell you what happened, but the novelist will tell you what it felt like. And I think that's true. Don't you feel, Melissa, that sometimes you read a novel that's historical and you think, I get the history now?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So as we talk about your book club, which you do every month on this show, you also lead book clubs around the community. So tell us what's next on your calendar.
Sure. So right now we still are virtual. And if you go to chapterendnotes.com, you can go sign up in person to discuss this book in detail. But we'll be discussing it online next week, Tuesday and Wednesday. And then we'll resume in the fall. I have a book club that's open to the community at San Marco Books and More, and you can ring them up and get on the list. And I'm very eager to get back in person and discuss literature. But I do have to tell you that talking about books during the pandemic, although online, the feeling of community is still there. And I think that's another thing that literature does for us. We start off as strangers, but literature makes us friends. And I'm just so in awe of the written word. And another way that people can come together when it comes to books is at the end of the month, May 26th, I'll be at the Cummer Museum of Art and Gardens virtually, talking about Middlemarch with art lecturer Cindy Edelman, and you can go to the Cummer and sign up there. And we'll be talking about the book Middlemarch and the artwork The Awakening Conscience. It's part of our literature series, which this entire year the theme has been coping with COVID. And I think if you have art and literature, you can cope.
That's right. It has sustained so many of us. Check out everything Stacy does at chapterendnotes.com and email the book club with ideas and feedback at bookclub@wjct.org. Stacy, thanks so much.
Thank you.
In a moment, how Art Bikes Jax is getting you off the couch with electric bikes for rent. We'll be right back.
Announcing Vickers Landing at Oak Bridge, bridging retirees with an all-new Ponte Vedra Beach community, featuring new homes, a resort lifestyle, and a life plan for every stage of aging. Information at vickerslanding.com.
CNS Healthcare is offering an agitation associated with Alzheimer's dementia research study. Has Alzheimer's changed your loved one? Have they shown verbal or physical symptoms of agitation? Learn more at 904-281-5757.
Jake Shimabukuro here. Please join me as I perform live at the WJCT Soundstage on Friday, June 11th at 8 p.m. I'll be performing songs on my ukulele from my most recent recording, The Greatest Day, plus cover songs by the Beatles and one of my favorites, Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. I've been able to travel and share the stage with a wide range of artists, including Yo-Yo Ma, Jimmy Buffett, Cyndi Lauper, Jack Johnson, Ziggy Marley, and I'm just looking forward to coming to Jacksonville. So please visit wjct.org/events to purchase tickets. Aloha.
On the next Fresh Air, writer Francisco Goldman. His book, The Art of Political Murder, about the assassination of a Guatemalan human rights activist, was adapted into an HBO documentary. His novel, Say Her Name, is a fictionalized account of the tragic death of his wife in a body surfing accident. He has a new autobiographical novel called Monkey Boy. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
She's one of the most powerful women in U.S. political history.
What is it that Putin has on him? We might know when we see his taxes.
Polarizing, determined, few women in U.S. politics have been as consequential as Nancy Pelosi. Author Susan Page explains why in her book, Madam Speaker. That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. It's a new way to get around town and explore this city's growing public art landscape. And guess what? The bike does all the work. I spoke with founder Ron Rothberg about Art Bikes Jax. Hi, Ron. Thanks for being with us.
Hello, Melissa. It is my pleasure. I hope you guys are well.
We are great, and it's great to hear your voice and also great to hear about your new venture, Art Bikes Jax. This is a genius idea. Electric bikes we can rent and use to cruise around town. How did this all come about?
Well, I had, as you know, and you've seen it, we have a mural on our fence at our house in Avondale. And I was so amazed and just astounded by how it brought community together. And from that, from outside my fence, I started understanding and learning more about the art of the public art in Jacksonville. And it is an international collection of wonderful pieces from renowned artists around the world.
Mm-hmm.
So the more I learned, the more I just realized, wow, I want to make sure everyone understands this resource we have in town. And then I walked into Open Road Bicycles in Avondale, and Holt, the owner there, had his first electric bike sitting there. And it immediately just dawned on me, I want a fleet of these, and I want to have art bikes. And it just grew from there.
A flash of inspiration. So the website is artbikesjax.com. People can go and rent an electric bike, which does all the work. You can cruise all around, and then they can do a couple of different things. They could just cruise the neighborhood, or they can do a self-guided tour checking out public art in the city. That's the idea, yes?
Exactly. There's two adventures. You can do a 90-minute Art Bikes picnic lunch where there's great areas and wonderful places to visit and take the bike to your perfect location. Or there's a 3-hour Art Bikes tour, and we have created a map, and it's downloadable in a program called Strava. And you put your phone on your bike, and you follow the route, and it takes you through this amazing collection. It's about 15 miles. But like you said, the bike does all the work. And the route that we have goes all the way through downtown. Lovely, all the installations on Forsyth, and then back on Adams Street, and then through the neighborhoods and along Riverwalk. It's a really wonderful adventure, and I hope people will check it out.
And the bikes themselves are decorated by local artists too, correct?
That's right. We have 2 decorated bikes in the fleet, and we're reaching out to local artists. Each month we're going to have a couple more released. So each month we're going to have the excitement around the next bikes that will join the fleet. There are several bikes available to rent right now, and we are going to be adding the customized one each month. So it's great. And also this Saturday with the WRAP garden tour. What a lovely way to see the garden tour on an art bike.
So Ron, in addition to promoting art and community, I think Art Bikes also does a great community service because you're helping promote this city becoming more walkable and bikeable.
Absolutely. The moment these bikes arrived, I started using them, and I parked my car. I could go a couple of miles and do a chore, pick up something at the store, and it was just such an easy way to get around. No worries with parking and all those things. Absolutely. I believe that you'll see these electric bikes are really going to be part of our community as we go forward. And if you've never ridden on it, it's just thrilling because you can pedal as much or as little as you want.
Yeah, and they're expensive to buy, so this is an easy way for people to access an electric bike too.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is something to get people on them, to get the thought in their head, and then eventually, hopefully, we'll park the cars and we'll just be all going along the road, riding on art bikes and watching and looking at all the wonderful sights that Jacksonville has to offer.
Okay, so again, the website is artbikesjax.com. People can go there. But to rent the bikes, they need to make a trip over to Avondale. That's the location.
Absolutely. No, you can just you can rent it on the website. Everything goes to the website. So.
But you have to pick the bike up in Avondale.
Correct. The bikes are available at Avondale's Open Road Bicycle Shop. So Holt is my co-conspirator there. He keeps the bikes there. He keeps them in tip-top shape. And so you know when you get on it, it is going to be a great experience.
So get on a bike, see some art, support artists, and get some fresh air and exercise. Keep the car in the garage. Go to artbikesjax.com and rent an electric bike. Take the tours on the downloadable setup that Ron has so kindly provided. He is the owner and creator of Art Bikes. What a great idea, Ron. And thank you so much for joining us with all the information.
You are quite welcome. Thank you, Melissa.
And have fun with it. That's our show. Thanks for listening, and thanks to all of our guests and callers, along with producer Heather Schatz and director Josh Torres. Let's also mention news director Jessica Palumbo and digital editor Bill Bortsfield and all the great work they do. Keep those emails coming. Send them to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Catch our podcast up later today, wherever you like to listen. You can listen as well through the WJCT app. Download that today. I'm Melissa Ross. This is First Coast Connect on WJCT 89.9 Jacksonville. We'll be right back here again at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Have a great day.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and